So it's been about a week since I've made my sort of opinion based on YouTube removing the dislike number or sort of making it private. And needless to say, I kind of feel like I kind of missed out on some stuff, as well as figuring out what's actually going to happen to the dislike button. Spoiler alert, it's not good. Remember when YouTube said they're putting the dislike count in the analytics section?
They can see it if they look for it inside Studio Analytics under the Engagement tab.
They didn't really say where in the analytics section, and honestly, it's very ridiculous and nobody's going to be able to see it unless they know the analytics back to front. So today, I'm going to talk about that. But if you haven't seen my initial video, I recommend watching that first because I'm sort of going to be referencing it a lot in this video. So on the top corner of your screen, there should be a button. Then you can just go ahead and click on that and watch the initial video. Come back, and then we can talk about what's actually going on, as well as just sort of a follow-up to my last video. But before we get dissecting into that, I'd just like to point out something real quick. According to recent analytics, a whopping 75% of the people that watch my videos aren't subscribed. So out of every 4 views, only 1 person is really subscribed. So I highly recommend, if you aren't subscribed yet, I highly recommend you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Then you know when I upload videos. So with that out of the way, let's get right into the new video. So basically, here's the Cliff Notes version of my last video. YouTube is going to be making the dislike number private, so essentially it just says dislike. For many YouTube users, this has already gone into effect. Not for me just yet, or at least when I was recording. But yeah, this is a pretty terrible idea. A lot of YouTube's reasoning for why they're making the dislike number private is relatively stupid. Like to prevent mass dislike attacks, which is honestly kind of ridiculous since it rarely happens. And what it does, it's mainly due to a big creative that probably doesn't care. However, I didn't quite sort of talk about something that I feel like would be a nice compromise where making the dislike number private is up to the creator. YouTube's main excuse was that it was going to encourage more harassment, which is honestly kind of ridiculous because this is a feature that's already on YouTube. It's the default setting for when you make a video targeted towards kids. When you market a video towards kids, likes and dislikes as well as comments are already turned off. And there's not really much harassment that comes from that. So no, YouTube is not doing this to protect the creators. I mentioned how YouTube is doing this to protect corporate channels, but I didn't really mention how it's going to protect corporate channels. So that's what I'm going to talk about first of all, sort of just a follow-up to my video, really. It's no obvious that a lot of corporations are really starting to take over YouTube, and YouTube's putting a lot of focus on them. I mean, if you look at the trending tab, majority of the time it's either some major channel or some major celebrity plastered all over it. Well, it isn't as bad as it was around 2017 and 2018. It's by no means improved much. Now, what I call a corporate channel is really just anyone or anything that got popular without YouTube, really. So, like a major corporation or a celebrity. Anyone that really didn't get their popularity from YouTube. And it is clearer than day, YouTube puts them in the top priority. They allow them to bend the rules as much as possible without consequence, while creators get slammed for even the slightest mistake. Now, YouTube always likes to claim that they're on our side, but it's clear it's not. The major corporate channels are the ones forking over millions of dollars in ad revenue, and YouTube wants to make sure they stick around so they can keep making that money. Because that's what all YouTube cares about, is just the money. So what does this all have to do with making the dislike number private? How is this going to protect the corporate channels? Or, at the very least, help them stay around? It's really simple. YouTube's doing this to censor criticism. Which, by the way, was actually going to be the initial title of my last video. YouTube is censoring criticism by removing the dislike count. The entire point of the dislike button is a nice way of criticism. It's not like you have to go super deep into explaining why. All you have to do is just hit the dislike button, and there you go. It's just sort of, points that really don't matter at the end of the day. However, this could really impact corporations and their decisions, and maybe revert some of the bad changes they might have created. One of the biggest examples is the loot crate system in Star Wars Battlefront 2, and also being forced to pay hefty amounts of credits just to unlock basic characters like Darth Vader or Luke Skywalker. When the game initially came out, Darth Vader costed over 60,000 credits. And since you can only get about 300 to 200 credits per round, you were pretty much forced to fork over tons of cash just to unlock a basic character. After fans sort of showed a lot of disapproval, EA tried to do some damage control, claiming that the whole point of it was to create pride and accomplishment for unlocking certain heroes. However, that reasoning ended up being the most downvoted post in Reddit history, getting nearly 700,000 downvotes in almost 3 days. EA would end up toning down the prices afterwards. What this basically boils down to is that the dislike button sort of gives the viewers and the people some control over the companies they like. Like I mentioned before, it's such a basic way of criticism that isn't really that harsh. It's just a dislike. And the more dislikes you get, the probably dumber the idea it was. But of course, YouTube cares a lot more about the corporations than the viewers. So removing the dislike count is going to give the corporations more power by cushioning and sort of silencing the amount of criticism, thus protecting the corporations and making them feel less like they don't belong on the site. Like I mentioned before, it was never about the creators. This was all about the corporations. And making them feel like they have more power is exactly what YouTube wants. Then YouTube gets more money, and then YouTube can profit more. But wait a minute. I thought YouTube still has the dislike number. It's just in the analytics section. Well, let me tell you about it. You see, YouTube didn't really mention much about the analytics section. I feel like YouTube just assumes everyone's so brain dead about it, and they just said, oh, it's just in the analytics section, don't worry about it. However, the analytics section isn't a section. It's almost like in a completely separate site from YouTube. The analytics section tells you how many views are getting from a day-to-day basis, the amount of ad revenue you're getting, the amount of demographic, where all your audience is coming from, being able to see where and how the viewers are finding you. It's an entirely different format, which really comes into effect when you start becoming a bigger channel. Which is why I mentioned this is going to severely harm younger and starter channels. But hey, at least it's easy to find the dislike count, right? Yeah, no, not at all. Absolutely not. You see, apparently, YouTube thought being able to see the exact number of likes on your interface wasn't a good idea. Instead, YouTube decided, like I mentioned before, just put it way back in the corner and just put a tarp over it. No one's going to be able to see it then. So now, in able to see the amount of dislikes you have to go to the engagement section of a certain video, and then you have to go to advanced analytics. You see, there is a like to dislike ratio on your standard analytics, however, it's just a percentage. It's basically the percentage of all the likes/dislikes you got that are likes. So, instead of seeing the exact number of likes and dislikes you got, you're only going to see you probably got about 98% likes. So now, you have to go to advanced analytics, swap the metrics to dislikes, and then you can see the amount of dislikes you have. Man, that's a lot of steps just to see a basic count. And you want to know the real icing on the cake here? Advanced analytics aren't in the mobile version of YouTube Analytics, which may remind you on mobile is a completely different app. So yeah, YouTube practically just removed dislikes entirely. YouTube just basically made the dislike count in the same sort of scenario as being able to see what region your viewers are from. This is just sad. The most basic form of criticism is now one of the most obscure metrics on the entire site. They've practically removed dislikes entirely. It's basically just pointless now. It's just sort of just, oh, I clicked on this button and I didn't like it. No one's going to be able to see it much anymore unless they look deep into the analytics now. And because of it, like I mentioned before, scams are going to be a lot more widespread, tutorials aren't going to be as effective, and new creators are not going to know how to improve and constantly get discouraged and quit. So yep, YouTube's removing dislikes, and there's nothing we can do about it. Or can we? While I doubt it's very unlikely that we're going to be able to succeed, I bet if everyone can get together and say, yeah, no, this is a terrible idea, YouTube might revert their decision. Keep in mind, a lot of people are against YouTube's decision. Even the founder of YouTube said that dislike numbers being removed was a horrible decision. I have never seen YouTube do something that was this universally hated and still think, yeah, I think this will be a great decision. Which makes this even more transparent that YouTube is not caring about content creators for this decision. Because if they truly did, they would have changed their mind. And I feel like we could possibly change this because of one example, YouTube Heroes. I don't know if many of you remember this because this was 5 years ago, but this was sort of a program YouTube was doing where the users can earn points for helping improving the site, or improving the site with heavy quotation marks. One of which, for example, was mass reporting videos. YouTube was straight out offering points so people can take down channels they don't like. It's honestly a great thing YouTube decided to change their mind on this, because it would have been an absolute nightmare of young kids trying their absolute hardest to take down as many channels as they can. Because it's just going to be young kids. I mean, who else is going to waste so much time on this stuff? But fortunately enough, this was back before YouTube didn't care about creators, so they managed to change the decision before it got way out of hand. And honestly, for the better. I mean, just offering points for doing something so heinous is just a terrible idea. Hey, wait a minute! Encouraging users to attack content creators by mass reporting their channels so they can get points that mean nothing? That's YouTube's reasoning for removing the dislike count! YouTube is removing public dislike numbers to prevent attacks on channels when 5 years ago they were straight up encouraging it? YouTube is a bunch of hypocrites. Plain and simple. Weird how YouTube doesn't like dislike numbers because it harms channels, even though it doesn't really matter at the end. Meanwhile, reporting videos and channels, that can actually harm the channels, even terminate them. And YouTube didn't even see a problem with that. What? Bottom line, YouTube's decision isn't just bad, it's mega hypocritical. Honestly, I'm going to be surprised if YouTube actually reverts their decision. I mean, they reverted the YouTube Heroes decision, so hopefully they'll actually finally come to their senses and bring back the dislike count. It's not as harmful to creators that they claim it is, and plus, it's going to keep the quality of YouTube passable. Not amazing like it used to be, but passable. Anyways, that's the video, guys. Thank you for watching, and yeah. Thank you for sitting through another 13-minute video of me ranting about something so pointless. Anyway.